The room fell silent as Bill Clinton walked into the high school gymnasium, his hands casually adjusting the cuffs of his sleeves. There was something magnetic about him, even in a crowd of teenagers who would have rather been anywhere else. As he made his way to the podium, a buzz of whispers spread throughout the audience. The former president had just arrived for career day at Springfield High, and no one expected the twist of fate that was about to unfold. "All right, everyone," the principal announced over the loudspeaker. "Let's give a warm welcome to our guest speaker, former President Bill Clinton." The gym erupted with applause, though not all of it was out of admiration. Some students clapped with genuine excitement, while others did so out of obligation. But no one could deny that Bill Clinton still carried an air of leadership and charisma, one that had once captivated an entire nation. He smiled, waving to the crowd, but as his gaze swept across the room, it landed on a single student in the back. It was Alex, a 17-year-old senior, who had spent the past few years feeling invisible. He wasn't particularly popular, didn't stand out in any way, just another face in the crowd. But when Alex's friends dared him to ask Clinton a question, something inside him clicked. It was a challenge he couldn't resist. With his palms sweating and his heart racing, Alex stood up, raising his hand. "Yes, young man." Bill Clinton's voice boomed, inviting Alex's question. The entire gym turned toward him. "Mr. Clinton," Alex stammered, feeling his stomach churn. "You've done it all, haven't you? You've been president. You've led the country. But if you could try something completely different, something totally outside your comfort zone, what would it be?" The crowd went quiet. Even the teachers leaned in, intrigued by the unexpected direction of the question. Bill Clinton paused, the hint of a smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "You're right," he said slowly. "I've been to the highest of highs in my career, but what about something that scares me?" He rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "I guess if I had to pick, I'd say, how about performing at a talent show?" A ripple of laughter spread through the crowd. Students exchanged glances, and Alex's heart sank. But Clinton wasn't done. "You know, I've never been on stage in that way before. I'm not much of a dancer, and I can't carry a tune in a bucket, but maybe I could give it a shot. What do you think?" The gym erupted into laughter, but it wasn't mocking. It was excitement. A few students even cheered. Alex's pulse raced faster, a strange sense of anticipation building up. Clinton's off-the-cuff remark wasn't just a joke, it was a challenge. And now, Alex had the chance to make it happen. He didn't think twice. "How about next week's school talent show?" Alex called out, his voice gaining confidence. "I bet you couldn't do it." The challenge had been thrown. The room fell even quieter, the tension palpable. Alex regretted it instantly, but there was no taking it back. Bill Clinton stood there, surveying the room, and then, without missing a beat, he smiled. "You're on, kid," he said, his voice steady and full of determination. "I'll show you what a former president can do." And just like that, the game was set. The bell rang, signaling the end of the day, but Bill Clinton couldn't shake the thought of the talent show. As he made his way back to his hotel room, the echo of Alex's challenge continued to bounce around in his mind. A former president, about to perform at a high school talent show? The irony was too rich, and the more he thought about it, the more he realized that this might be the most fun he'd had in years. But there was a problem. Clinton had no idea what he was going to do. The next morning, as the sun streamed through his hotel window, he pulled himself out of bed and sat at the small desk with a pad of paper in front of him. He needed a plan, something that would make an impact. But what? "Maybe I'll do a little bit of saxophone," he muttered to himself. After all, it wasn't a talent show without a little music, right? He picked up the phone and dialed the front desk. "Is there a music store nearby?" Within the hour, Clinton found himself standing in front of a small shop filled with instruments of all kinds. The owner, a middle-aged man with a thick southern drawl, gave him an approving nod when he walked in. "Looking for something specific, sir?" the man asked, eyes glancing over Clinton's suit and tie. "I think I'm going to need a saxophone," Clinton said matter-of-factly. "Maybe a lesson or two, too. You know, just to get the basics down." The shopkeeper raised an eyebrow, but quickly nodded, leading him to a row of instruments in the back. Clinton tried a few, picking up the shiny saxophone and inspecting it, as though weighing the decision. He'd played a little in the past, but it had been years since he'd really given it a go. "I'll take it," Clinton said, finally making up his mind. Back at his hotel, Clinton spent the rest of the afternoon practicing the basics, trying to remember the few tricks he had once learned in his youth. The sound was rusty at first, awkward even. But the more he played, the more he began to get the hang of it. By the time evening rolled around, Clinton was ready for more. He decided to take his practice a step further. He needed a real performance, something that would show the students that he wasn't just a politician. He could also be fun, spontaneous, and daring. So he did what any self-respecting former president would do. He called his old saxophone instructor. "Jim, it's Bill Clinton. I need your help," he said after a few pleasantries. "I've got a talent show coming up, and I'm thinking about performing. Got any quick tips for an old sax player?" Jim, his instructor, was more than happy to oblige. He walked Clinton through a few exercises to get his embouchure right, teaching him how to control his breath and get a smoother sound from the sax. For hours, they worked together, fine-tuning the basics until Clinton felt he was ready to try something a little more complex. Later that night, after his lesson, Clinton stood in front of a mirror, looking at his reflection. Was he really going to do this? Play the saxophone at a high school talent show, in front of hundreds of teenagers and a handful of news cameras? "Why not?" he muttered, adjusting his tie. "If I'm going to go down, it might as well be with some style." As the days passed, the media buzz surrounding Clinton's participation in the talent show reached a fever pitch. News outlets covered the story, students posted memes, and social media was flooded with hashtags like #ClintonCanPlay and #SaxWithBill. Students at Springfield High had mixed feelings about the whole thing. Some couldn't wait to see the former president perform. Others thought it would be a colossal disaster. By the time the night of the talent show arrived, the gym was packed with parents, teachers, and students. The atmosphere was electric, and the air was thick with anticipation. "Bill Clinton is about to take the stage." The principal's voice rang out over the loudspeaker. "Let's give him a big round of applause." The lights dimmed, and the spotlight centered on Clinton, who stood backstage, gripping his saxophone tightly. His heart raced, and he felt the weight of the moment sink in. He hadn't been this nervous since his first presidential debate. "Well, here goes nothing," he muttered to himself, stepping into the spotlight. As Bill Clinton stood backstage, the deafening noise of the crowd spilled over into the waiting area. The gymnasium at Springfield High was packed, and the buzz of excitement about his performance was palpable. It wasn't just any performance. It was the former president of the United States stepping onto a high school stage to play the saxophone. Everyone, from students to teachers, were eager to see what would happen next. The spotlight flickered on, signaling that it was his turn. Clinton adjusted his tie one last time and walked onto the stage, his saxophone in hand. He could hear the whispers in the audience, the sounds of phones being raised for a picture, the low hum of anticipation. As he reached the center of the stage, Clinton took a deep breath, trying to calm his nerves. He glanced out into the audience and saw Alex sitting near the front, a grin plastered on his face. Alex had no idea what he had just unleashed, a challenge that had escalated into something much larger than either of them could have anticipated. But now it was time to deliver. "All right, Springfield High," Clinton said, his voice booming across the gym. "I don't know if you all are ready for this, but here it goes." With that, he raised the saxophone to his lips, and for the first time in years, Clinton blew a note. It wasn't perfect, but it wasn't a disaster either. The sound reverberated through the gym, cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. He played another note, then another. The crowd held their breath. The first song was a familiar one, "Hail to the Chief," a nod to his presidential days. Clinton's hands moved shakily at first, but as the notes flowed from the saxophone, the nerves began to dissipate. He was no longer the former president. He was just a man playing a song he loved. He paused after the first tune, wiping his brow with the back of his hand. The audience was silent, waiting for what came next. This wasn't a simple performance. It was his chance to show them that no matter how far he had come in life, he was still willing to put himself on a line for something fun, something spontaneous. Clinton took a breath and began to play another song, this time a soulful rendition of a classic jazz tune. Take 5. The melody filled the gym, and this time, Clinton's fingers moved with confidence, the music flowing smoothly. The audience started to shift in their seats, nodding along with the rhythm, tapping their feet. It wasn't just about the music, it was about the experience. The crowd wasn't just witnessing a performance by a politician. They were watching a human being, someone willing to be vulnerable, to step out of his comfort zone, and to do something unexpected. But just as the music reached its peak, something happened. The saxophone slipped from Clinton's hands. For a moment, time seemed to slow. The instrument fell to the floor with a loud thud, and Clinton's heart stopped. A gasp rippled through the crowd. This was it. This was the moment that could make or break his performance. Without missing a beat, Clinton picked up the saxophone, adjusted it in his hands, and flashed a smile at the audience. "Well, that wasn't part of the plan," he said, laughing along with the crowd. "But hey, it wouldn't be a true performance without a little excitement, right?" The audience roared with laughter, and Clinton, feeling the weight lift off his shoulders, took a deep breath. He resumed playing, this time with even more energy. The music carried him, and the crowd was right there with him, caught up in the rhythm, the spontaneity, and the sheer joy of the moment. As the final notes of the song echoed through the gym, Clinton stood still, his heart racing. The audience stood, clapping and cheering, giving him a standing ovation. For a moment, he was no longer a former president. He was just Bill Clinton, a man who had embraced the challenge, faced his fear, and delivered a performance that no one would soon forget. The gymnasium was alive with energy, the clapping and cheers echoing off the walls. Bill Clinton stood at the center of the stage, his saxophone hanging loosely at his side. His chest heaved with exertion, and his face was flushed with excitement. He had done it. He had faced the challenge, put himself out there, and played his heart out literally. The audience had responded, not just with their applause, but with a genuine connection. It wasn't just about the performance. It was about the courage to step out of the comfort zone, to do something unexpected. Clinton smiled as he took a bow, his eyes scanning the crowd. The students, who moments ago had been doubtful, now stood with wide eyes, some with their hands still clapping. Alex, the student who had dared him to take on the challenge, was grinning ear to ear, his friends patting him on the back. They couldn't believe it. The former president had actually done it, and done it well. As the applause died down, Clinton lifted his hand in a gesture of thanks. "Thank you, Springfield High," he said, his voice sincere. "You were a great audience. And remember, no matter how old you get or how far you go in life, there's always room for a little fun, a little spontaneity. Never be afraid to take a chance." With that, Clinton left the stage, his saxophone still in hand, as the crowd continued to cheer behind him. Backstage, the reality of the performance started to set in. Clinton was met by a swarm of students, each eager to congratulate him on his impromptu performance. Alex pushed his way through the crowd, eyes wide with excitement. "That was amazing," Alex said, slapping Clinton on the back. "You actually did it. You really played." Clinton laughed, his chest still filled with the adrenaline of the moment. "I told you I'd give it a shot. I may have been a little rusty, but I'm glad I could make it happen." "You were incredible," Alex said, shaking his head in disbelief. "I thought you were going to just give up halfway through." "Not a chance," Clinton said, his grin widening. "Once I agreed, I was committed. And hey, what's the worst that could happen? If it didn't work out, at least we would have had a good laugh." Just then, the principal approached, a broad smile on her face. "Bill, that was fantastic. I've never seen the students so energized. You've done something incredible here today." Clinton nodded, still feeling the rush. "It was a lot of fun. Honestly, I think I enjoyed it as much as they did." "I think it's safe to say you've just earned the title of Most Unexpected Talent Show Performance in Springfield High history," the principal added with a wink. As Clinton began to make his way out of the gymnasium, he was stopped by a group of teachers. "Bill, you were great. That was a performance no one will forget." "It's all about stepping out of your comfort zone," Clinton said with a laugh. "You never know what you're capable of until you give it a shot." Outside, the media was buzzing. News cameras were already set up to interview the students and staff, eager to capture their reactions to the former president's performance. Clinton stopped for a moment to speak with a few reporters. "Mr. Clinton, how does it feel to have done something so different?" one reporter asked, holding a microphone toward him. "Well," Clinton began, I've been president. I've made speeches in front of thousands, but there's something about performing for a group of high school students that's different. It's raw. It's real. And it's a reminder that, no matter what, we all need to have a little fun once in a while. As the interview wrapped up, Clinton made his way back to his car, where Alex and a few of his friends were waiting. "Mr. Clinton, you were amazing," Alex said, his voice full of admiration. "Alex, you really did me a favor," Clinton replied with a wink. "This was one of the best challenges I've ever taken on." As Clinton drove away, he reflected on the night's events. He had come to Springfield High to speak about leadership, but what had happened was far more meaningful. He had shown the students that leadership wasn't just about power or prestige. It was about vulnerability, courage, and stepping outside your comfort zone. He had given them something to remember, that even the most powerful figures can be humbled by a challenge, and that sometimes the greatest victories come not from success, but from the willingness to try. The next few days felt like a whirlwind. Bill Clinton's performance at Springfield High had taken on a life of its own. Social media was flooded with clips of his saxophone playing, memes about his unexpected talent, and hashtags like #ClintonSaxChallenge trending all over the place. News outlets ran stories, and even late-night talk shows picked up the story, turning it into an overnight sensation. But the true impact of Clinton's performance wasn't measured in viral videos or media attention. It was in the way the students at Springfield High reacted. The atmosphere had shifted. Suddenly, the students who had been too shy to raise their hands were speaking up in class. The ones who had stayed quiet, hiding behind their phones, began to step out of their shells, encouraged by the example that even someone as accomplished as Clinton was willing to take a risk and embrace the unknown. For Alex, the whole experience had been transformative. He went from a typical high school senior, blending into the crowd, to a student with a story that everyone wanted to hear. The moment he had challenged Bill Clinton to perform had shifted his place in the school's social hierarchy. But it wasn't the attention that mattered most. It was the way it had forced him to believe in the unexpected. It had reminded him that sometimes the best opportunities come when you least expect them. One afternoon, Alex found himself in the school's courtyard, walking alongside Clinton, who had come back to Springfield High to visit a few days after the talent show. They were surrounded by students who still couldn't believe the former president had been there, playing the saxophone just like any other student. "Alex," Clinton said, his voice thoughtful, "I'll tell you something I've learned over the years. The greatest moments in life don't always come from planning. Sometimes they come from saying yes to an opportunity that scares you. The real growth happens when you take risks." Alex nodded, absorbing every word. "I guess you could say the same about you, huh? You could have easily said no to the talent show, but you didn't." Clinton smiled. "Exactly. It wasn't about the music. It wasn't about being perfect. It was about putting myself out there and showing you all that it's okay to fail, to look foolish sometimes. The world doesn't end when you make a mistake. In fact, sometimes that's where the real magic happens." As they continued to walk, more students approached, eager to share their thanks or simply get a picture with him. It was clear that the former president had left an indelible mark on this group of high schoolers. He had shown them that success wasn't defined by titles or accomplishments, but by the courage to try something new and face challenges head-on. Later that day, as Clinton prepared to leave Springfield for his next engagement, he found Alex one last time, standing by the school's front gate. "I want to thank you," Clinton said, offering a handshake. "If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have had the guts to step up and play in that talent show. You challenged me to do something outside my comfort zone, and in the process, I think I learned as much as any of you." Alex shook his hand firmly. "It's a crazy thing, isn't it? You came here to teach us about leadership, but you ended up teaching us something else entirely. How to be brave enough to embrace the unexpected." Clinton laughed, his face full of warmth. "That's the best lesson I could teach, Alex. Never stop trying new things, no matter how old you get. Keep pushing yourself." As Clinton drove off into the distance, leaving Springfield High behind, he couldn't help but feel a deep sense of satisfaction. This wasn't just another political speech or a staged appearance. It had been real, genuine, and deeply human. It had reminded him that no matter how many titles or accolades one collects in life, the most meaningful moments are often the ones that come when you least expect them. And in that moment, Clinton knew one thing for sure. He would carry the lessons of that talent show with him for the rest of his life. If you liked the video, don't forget to subscribe and press the like button.